Gonna take a pill and go back in time. Dun, dun, dun. You know the words? Gonna stand in a very specific part of my apartment and go back in time. Dun, dun. Sorry. That's as much singing I'm going to do. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insight into the creative process of storytelling. Folks, we are going to go back in time today, and we're going to do it with these fine fellows. Writer and co-director Justin Benson and co-director Aaron Moorhead, because they made the fine film Synchronic, which is what we're going to be talking a lot about today. And it is a time travel movie of sorts, and I absolutely love it. So how about that? And so that there is a lot to sing about, damn it. Look, it just came out this week. It's a new movie that has been patiently awaiting its 2021 release, and I hope you are there for it. Look, Justin and Aaron had a lot of great things to say about their creative process. They really had a well thought out film to make, even though at times it's a hair complicated, but not so complicated when we get into the nitty gritty of talking about it. So there is a lot for you to enjoy about the way that they divulge their creative process. So I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, guess what? We just published Backstory issue 42, our new issue, and I hope you check it out over at backstory.net. Speaking of time travel, we have an amazing retro piece that I wrote that I absolutely loved for the movie 12 Monkeys. We interviewed co-writers David Webb Peoples and his wife Janet Peoples. Their script really holds up 25 years later, and we went very deep into it. And we have script excerpts for you to read, including the original abandoned ending that has Brad Pitt showing up to the airport. So there's a lot of cool stuff in that article, and it's a big, big article. And there's a lot of great content in issue 42. We have Simon Kinberg, who's given us the rights to publish his entire first screenplay, the one that like put him on the map, that's sold, that's never been made, Ghouls of New York. We have director Joe Carnahan with a project he's working on called LA 58. And it's another unpublished screenplay by a writer of note, Joe Carnahan, and his brother, Matthew Michael Carnahan. They co-wrote it. And it's a great read, and I think they're getting really near to making it, and that's one of my favorite things that we could do in the magazine. So there's a lot for you to see. You could check out the table of contents over at backstory.net, and if you've never read us, you could test drive us by going to backstory.net. You could look in the Backstory app as well. You could test drive us there, because we have a free issue to test drive us, is what I was talking about in both places. And you could also read us on a desktop or laptop. If you want to subscribe, use code SAVE5 over at backstory.net. That will save you $5 off a subscription. It'll get you a year's worth of access to Backstory, including our archive. We're on issue 42. It currently goes back to issue 30, and I'm actually working on adding 29 to it, because we have to keep re-adding our old issues to our archive because it got zapped at the beginning of 2020. But it's a new year, 2021, damn it. So I'm happy that we're in the new year and we're still adding into our archive, which we'll continue doing throughout the year. But look, there's a lot of great stuff for you to see. So it really would mean a lot for me, for my podcast listeners, to support my passion project. So thanks for considering reading Backstory Magazine. But now, without any further ado, I hope you support independent cinema this year, just as I hope you were supporting it last year. So please go see Synchronic and support Aaron and Justin's film. But now, without any further ado, let's talk to Aaron and Justin about Synchronic. Okay, so Justin, Aaron, welcome. I absolutely loved your film, so I'm excited to talk to you guys today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Likewise.
All right. Well, so, the easiest place to start, what I always love to do, is just kind of start with breaking in. Did you guys study film? Did you go to school for it? And how did you get your first gig in the industry, per se?
I actually go ahead. Yeah.
And tell me who's who, just so our viewers know too.
I'm Justin, and I'm Aaron.
Okay, good.
On the podcast, I know we have similar voices, so just whoever has the answers that are just rambling and incoherent, that's Aaron.
Oh, good. So breaking in, did you go to school? How did you start?
Yeah, I mean, I wish Aaron has like the cool, really like romantic, like Spielberg story where he started making films when he was like -1.
Take my story.
Like before he was conceived, he was like a filmmaker, and it's like so romantic. I don't have that story. I think I discovered that I liked. What was it? this is kind of terrible at this. When I was like 17 or 18 years old, a friend of mine introduced me to like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Before Sunrise, Chasing Amy, sort of like minimalist films. For some reason, I just really liked them, and I thought, I don't know, there's something to that. I feel like maybe I could do that. Like, I love stuff like Lord of the Rings and Jurassic Park, but I think I look at it and I'm like, I'm not smart enough to do anything on a technical level in those films. But I thought there was something about like, oh, I feel like I can make people talk, but like talk good. But for some reason, I just felt like there was like a spark to it, and then I got really interested in filmmaking. I was community college bound at the time. It turned out I was like really good at community college, and so then somehow I got into UCLA, studied film there, got out, spent about a decade totally striking out at everything, mostly making a living from like I could barely get a job as like, I'm terrible at waiting tables, so a lot of times I'd be like bussing tables. I eventually like worked my way up to like bartending and waiting tables eventually. And always just like using that money made from those jobs to make short films and to make like fake commercials, like spec ads to try to get commercial jobs. And then I met Aaron as I was interning at a commercial production company. And we both kind of had a do-it-yourself ethos and had a skill set that complemented each other. Started making a bunch of small commercials together, hoping we could break in as commercial filmmakers. Quickly learned that it's harder to break in as a commercial director than it is like an indie film director. I'd say that's probably true, right?
I don't know. It might be kind of the same. Definitely hard for us. Yeah.
Oh, actually, okay. Or maybe we're just really bad at making commercials. Really bad at it.
No, actually, we're really good at it. Please hire us for commercials.
But
so did you guys make a few commercials before you started making films?
Oh, we spent our own money making basically fake commercials.
Well, right. No, I know what spec ads were, but did you ever get a real gig?
We low budget direct to client.
Yeah,
not like real commercials, like internet commercials.
Yeah. And then my story is I was in 6th grade, and do you know the singer Bertie Higgins by any chance?
No.
He sang this song called Key Largo, which everybody knows, but it also is easily confused with Kokomo by the Beach Boys.
Right.
But it goes, we had it all. That's his song. So he lived in my hometown, and I was best friends with his son, who brought me over one day and showed me stop action Star Wars animation films that he made with his brother Julian. And I was like immediately like, this is it. This is like the coolest thing in the world. And that was it. Like it wasn't that day, but it was definitely within like a month or two that I was like, I'm going to be a movie maker, and saved up for like a year and a half to buy like $100 camera, and saved up even longer to buy a computer to edit it with, because it hadn't yet, the digital revolution hadn't happened. So it was like, capturing tape to like ye old Vegas Pro. But I made like 100 short films before I got to film school. They were all like ridiculous and horrible and like poorly thought out, but they existed.
And where did you go to film school?
I went to Florida State.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I would say I developed like half of my, what you would say like is, I don't want to use the word voice because it sounds pretentious, but the half of like why I do the things that I do on set, and then the other half of that came from like meeting Justin, and we just started like, I figured out that what was missing, what I felt like was missing. It was like, oh, there's this whole other thing that I couldn't quite piece together until he and I started making movies together.
He needed someone to like drop light stands and make badges.
Yeah. I was like, I just really need someone to co-filmmake with me to hold the boom pole. If you can just do that.
I mean, you guys are a great team, and your films prove that. And I just want to I want to focus on your 3 previous films, just briefly. I could do entire podcasts for each of them, but just like, I'm going to ask you basically the same question 3 times because I want to get to Synchronic because I love it so much. But basically, Resolution 2012, that was your first movie. And, again, like a lot of your work, it has the ingredients that are perfect for a independent genre movie. It has like generally one location or one really solid location that you keep coming back to. And I would say that it's high concept, and low budget, and that's what you guys really specialize in, these kind of stories that have a Twilight Zone feel to them. So 2 questions on each of these films. What was your budget and schedule on Resolution? And looking back now, what was your biggest lesson?
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah, love it.
I'm going to take the easy one.
The budget and schedule?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know which one's
I'll get half of it wrong.
Yeah.
So the budget was $20,000 and the schedule was 18 days.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It was an 18-day shoot, $20,000 budget.
I just want to hear, while you're thinking of the answer, I just remembered something, because you said like, oh yeah, there's a thing to it. I just realized all 3 films, and this dovetails with the schedule and budget. All 3 of our first 3 films have characters that never change their clothes for a story reason, but also, man, it makes it a lot easier to shoot up on the schedule. Not like this one.
Nope. We're making a project right now that has like 1 billion wardrobes.
Yeah, we change wardrobes 3 times a day. And then there's they leave. It involves 2 people almost exclusively, with a few other side characters, and actually no, not the Endless. The Endless has an ensemble, but and they leave their home for 1 week, exactly 1 week, where crazy stuff happens, and that's kind of
Exactly.
Yeah, and weirdly, that's a low budget mindset. What we just said, it works for us as storytellers, but it's also like there are things to the general concept of what we said that makes it possible to make low budget films.
Yeah.
Okay, so
there's
right, well, I want to get to Synchronic though. So biggest lesson on Resolution.
Sorry. Okay. To start out, one thing is, after every shoot, we always have like some stupid lesson we learn that we never actually go to. We're just like weirdly frustrated about it. And it's like, what took forever? Hair. Let's make sure characters don't have hair anymore. Yeah. Like, it'll be like that. Yeah. But then of course you don't always do that. So
a lot of shaved heads in the movies. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, what is like the biggest lesson? Well, okay. I mean, here's kind of one.
Got it. I know it.
There's one that when we made our first movie, you're doing a lot because the budget's so tiny, and you think that you're going to do your next movie, and you're like, oh, we'll do less jobs. We'll be like real directors. We'll just direct. And then you can't get enough money to make your next movie, so you do all the jobs again. I mean, not all the amazing collaborators, but you're not doing like a traditional, what a director did in the 1950s is not what we do. Yeah. You kind of have to get into everything. And then the next movie, we have no money, we're going to have to do more. But then you don't, and you end up doing like a lot of the jobs, and you realize that is your process. That is your process. Doing all those jobs and doing all that stuff, that's how our movies turn out the way they do. And once you start taking those things away, it just doesn't feel like things are going as well as they.
Yeah, things just get muddy and lost in weird little ways unless you have your fingerprints on everything. Has nothing to do with control, and has everything to do with having an extreme top-down view of everything and discover it. And so you can discover it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Same question for Spring, your 2014 film. Budget and schedule.
Spring was $500,000, and it was, I believe, 20 days in Italy. 24 days. 24 days in Italy and 3 days in the United States. But they were short. They were short Italian days. I shouldn't say short Italian days, but they were 9 hours instead of 12. So technically, It was more like 20 days. So,
all right. Biggest lesson on Spring.
No one should have hair.
No one should have hair. Yeah. Biggest lesson on Spring was actually, here's a good one. The common advice as we were trying to figure out how to make a no budget, or very truly, I shouldn't say no budget. $500,000 is a lot of money to an indie filmmaker, but for what people normally would spend on a movie like that in the millions, the common advice is just, well, you can't shoot in Italy then. There's going to be problems there. There's going to be, there's labor laws, there's corruption, there's laziness, like just a bunch of like really stereotypical, borderline racist kind of stuff. And we just did it anyways with this amazing producer named Luca. And the lesson is shoot in Italy. It was amazing. It was amazing.
People were pushing us like, well, do you think about rewriting it for Colombia, rewrite it for Montenegro, rewrite it for
Jakarta,
rewrite it for Baltimore, and use a lot of visual effects. But like it turned out that the most financially responsible decision was to do it in Italy, and no one could have anticipated that. Totally.
Well, and it added to the production value of it too. Just just that background is beautiful. Okay, Endless. The Endless, your 2017 film. I could do an entire episode on. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Let's
It got you guys. I got you guys a lot of attention. What was the budget and schedule for it, and your biggest lesson? And by the way, I'm happy to come back anytime and do an episode on it.
Let's do it. Yeah. The budget was $200,000. The schedule was, which is interesting because it's less than half of spring. And then the schedule was 17 days. I'm going to go first on the biggest lesson because I already have that. It's kind of taking the same thing as Resolution, where after making Spring, a lot of doors had opened to us, and we met everybody that you would want to meet in, quote unquote Hollywood. We'd walked through a lot of doors and all that. And by the way, like, it was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of love, but like, either they would be like, here's our script we would like you to do, and we read it, like, this is garbage. And it's never happened that, or I shouldn't say this is garbage. We could say, often we could actually say this just isn't for us. But I can also say that those scripts, if or when they got made, which was very rare, the final product was still not something we wish we'd done. It's not like we missed out on an opportunity. And so we realized, we're like, hang on, what if we were worried that it was going to be a step back? We're going to cast ourselves. We're going to make this no-budget movie. It feels like everyone is kind of expecting us to like leap up into this other thing after Spring. And actually, it was the best thing we'd ever done for ourselves, is going and like casting ourselves and putting together a movie with less than half the tiny budget that we already had on our second movie. And it was incredibly satisfying. And as you say, it got us a lot of attention, and that was a shock. We just thought we were making some insular, weird, almost an inside joke, something that we wanted to make sure everybody would understand and love, whether or not you've seen our movies or know us. But we were just shooting from the hip when it comes to like, was it a good plan or not? Was it a good movie or not? It's like, okay, that was not shooting from the hip. We were like really working on, like, it's a very deliberate movie. But it was, we pitched it to our agents, who have always been super supportive, as it's a side project while we're still working on the next thing. And then we realized, like, this is not a side project. This is everything. So
I was just basically the same answer. So I'm just
okay.
And my rephrasing is that don't worry about going up in budget and going up in scale. Worry about hopefully growing as a storyteller.
Yeah. That's solid advice. Well, Synchronic, it played at Beyond Fest. I was there at the Mission Tiki Drive-In, and Beyond Fest here in Los Angeles did an excellent job this year to get us film geeks out and outdoors and together, but safely in our cars and masked up when we were not in our cars. So I don't know, it was a blast. And I loved it. I honked my horn many times in the end credits.
Thank you.
That's how you clap at the drive-in.
It's a video of it. Yeah, someone sent us a video of all the flashing and stuff. It was really exciting.
Yeah. Well, so the most boring question that I'm sure you guys gotten a lot, and we're going to get into a spoiler section in a bit where we could talk about the intricacies of the movie. But the non-spoiler question is, when did you get the idea for Synchronic? What was the seed of the idea? And we'll get more into the story details in a little bit.
Sure. Actually, can I ask you a quick question? And
of course.
This would be interesting for movie geeks. But so you were at that was the first drive-in that played Synchronic, and we actually got our distributor was really wonderful working with us and recolor timed the movie for drive-ins, because we know that a lot of people have been seeing horror movies at drive-ins, or horror, sci-fi, darker movies. Our movie's very dark. And saying, like, I can't see it. And we had that same experience with a few movies. And they color timed it by bumping up the brightness. Can you tell me? Because we weren't able to be there. Was it bright enough?
It was, and you're right. And part of the brightness issue at drive-ins is because the bulbs are sometimes dim, because it's very expensive to change bulbs these days for a digital projector often, and you need a lot of brightness to hit a drive-in the way that they do. So I think bumping your levels is important. And yeah, I could see everything. Your movie gets really dark at times, just like, in the density of your colors and stuff like that, and the brightness. But yeah, it worked perfectly. So that's cool that you guys did your own version for drive-ins. I guess in the digital age, that's easier to do. But okay, tell us really quick where you got the idea for Synchronic and how you came up with it. Because I'm a time travel buff, so this was great.
Yeah, we were once again in between movies and jobs. It's actually written before The Endless, right?
Yeah, it was written in 2015.
Yeah. And so we're kind of thinking, actually, kind of in that same idea of talking about the endless, being like, okay, let's think of like this bigger idea. But that was just in the atmosphere somewhere. And we were at a bar or a cafe or something. We spent a lot of damn time together. And Justin said, like, he's like, I know this sounds lame, but I read a quote by Einstein. And it's a quote that says the distinction between the past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. And it's an amazing quote when you actually think about it, because he was referring to death. He was saying that it doesn't matter, death doesn't matter if you think in that mindset, if you're able to. And so he said that idea scares me if you could actually see time that way. And so we started developing the idea right then and there for a drug or a pill that lets you see it that way. I think pretty quickly after it was designer drugs, right?
Yeah, designer synthetic analogs, basically, which are, so like designer drugs would be like, that's a broader category of like, oh, ecstasy is a designer drug. You can't sell ecstasy at a smoke shop. So like the reason we say designer synthetic analogs is there are drugs sold in like head shops and smoke shops in America that are like the infamous bath salts, right? And they have typically very small runs, very small batches before they get cracked down on, and they have to change the chemistry of it just enough to put it back out on the market, typically with the same brand or the same label. And when you start looking into that stuff, it's really fascinating because really people don't know what those things do. The bath salts thing is exaggerated. That guy who ate the person's face off, unfortunately, he wasn't. There was no bath salts involved.
Yeah,
that was
it was a media thing.
Yeah. The truth is we don't know what bath salts are. We know that they are they're a synthetic analog for a plant that's used, I believe, in East Africa called khat, K-H-A-T. But the point is there hasn't been any research on these things. And so there was something about using that as the delivery method because, okay, if it's a small batch, that means we can keep this small, like the feeling that Twilight Zone feeling, just maybe this thing happened in some small corner of the world, but you just didn't know about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was actually going to ask that, like, was this going on all over the world, or was it really just like this one city?
Yeah, it really was just that one city. And that's actually how they work. And it's funny because we really wanted to dive into that idea, but also then you have to get into the weeds of dialogue of like legality of like how these batches are created and how they're cracked down on. And we have a scene where in a few sentences somebody quickly tells you what's up. But, that idea is actually fascinating and we know a whole lot more about it. And we wanted to really dive into it. And it's like, man, no one wants to know about the laws of Louisiana, designer drugs, and, and also it's not the story of the person trying to pull all of it off the shelves. It's a different story. But
yeah. I mean, you gave just enough exposition, so that definitely did work. Well, I mean, that's good to see the seeds of the story. Speaking of storytelling, Justin, I want to talk about your writing habit for a second because you wrote the screenplay. When you sit down to write, how important is outlining to your process?
It kind of depends on what the script is for, or I'll put it this way: if it's a hired job, which there's obviously been very, very few of those, but usually in those you need to be communicating with people at a more like foundational level. And so, obviously always that could be an outline, that could be a treatment, that could be a beat sheet, whatever you want to call it. I think for Aaron and I, the stuff that we develop mostly just between him and I, that we just kind of choose different processes each time. Sometimes it is actually an outline or a beat sheet or a treatment or something like that. Synchronic is unique in all the movies we've made in that it has, in some ways, a little bit more of a traditional development process because there were several producers who came on board or came off or things like that. Where it was like, it's had more cycles of notes than probably other scripts we've done. Other scripts we've done happened pretty quick. Where it was like, the Endless was, how long was it? Like three months.
Yeah.
Most of them were like 3 to 6 months of development, whereas Synchronic went through just a lot more drafts than other projects we've done.
Okay. And so when you sit down to write, how many hours a day do you give yourself to write, or do you give yourself a page count that you want to hit?
I usually want to hit 6 pages. If it's screenwriting, I want to hit 6 pages, which isn't very much. I usually end up somewhere in the range of like 6 to 10 if I'm trying to hit 6. And usually what it is wake up in the morning before I can think about anything else, just start doing it with some caffeine. And then usually before you know it, a few hours have gone by, and then basically go do something like go work out, get the blood flowing. And while I'm working out, things start popping into my head, things I messed up, things I need to add, things like that. And then I go back in and do another 2 to 3 hours typically.
That's great. And what do you do if you get writer's block, if you get it?
I just keep writing. I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's probably what I do. Like I just keep going and going and going. And
yeah, he's a machine. Without, and I shouldn't even say that because it sounds like it's when I say he's a machine, it sounds like he's just kind of like crapping something out no matter what. But it's funny. Like we have a very in-depth development process, but it's always like whatever is handed to me is always still going to be something that surprises and impresses me. I've never been like, oh, wow, well, I guess you had a bad day. You know, like it's pretty incredible.
Well, so you guys are also co-directors in all your movies. Just briefly, I know this is another question you've been asked a million times, but how do you break down the dereliction of duties? Or, like not the dereliction.
Dereliction.
You're not derelict. The distinction
of duties.
Yes. How do you break down your distinction of duties? Your distinction of duties.
Honestly, if we had our way, it would just say, like a film by Moorhead and Benson, and then that would be the end of it, and then it would just be our other collaborators. But it doesn't quite work that way. Producing is it's all under the umbrella of filmmaking. It's just like there's just this list of stuff that has to get done. Whatever it is, like it's just stuff. It's on a list. Writing the script is on a list. Shooting the movie's on a list. And you got to check it off somewhere. And so there's no part of the process that is creatively uninformed by the other at all.
I guess I would ask it a different way.
I'll sit down and I'll write out like some ideas I have on the lighting plan, but it just goes to Justin, and Justin adjusts it. Like it's and same thing with writing.
And that's same thing with writing.
Yeah. It's and same thing with the editing, and we just.
Well, wait, that's interesting though. You say same thing on writing, but actually Justin has sole credit on each of these movies.
Yeah, I mean it's just
so do you, Aaron? Do you write with him or?
I develop with him. We sit down and we develop. So like, there's like
you break the idea.
Sometimes there's like a 20-page treatment that I have authorship on, something like that. But it's not.
Okay.
I don't actually hit the script.
I mean, some directors sometimes split up their duties between like acting and technical stuff, where one focuses more on the other. Are you guys like that at all, or do you each just interchange the same way?
Just kind of do anything that needs to be done. One of us does it. And there's no really division of labor. One is shamefully like I can't do visual effects, but I understand them pretty well.
I guess that's one thing that we do divide up. I do all the visual effects. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I would be very sad if people thought of one of us as the person who knows how to make something look good, and the other one is who knows how to make something perform well, or like it's just not. It's not
okay.
that. We're just not that people. I hope that I direct actors just fine, even though I'm the DP as well. His camera work is also just wonderful, and even though you know what I mean, like we really don't like to think of it that way, and it doesn't feel that way when we're working.
Well, Aaron, actually, about you being the DP, you've been the DP on each of your projects. What would you say has changed the most about your style as a cinematographer on your films as you've evolved?
Actually, what's funny is I keep on trying to chase what I used to do a little bit more. I've actually been trying to regress into something a little bit more simple and innocent when it comes to just things like breaking eye lines and more simplistic lighting, so that you can just have a little bit more time. Because the problem is the more you do it, the more your brain notices when something's wrong and you want to fix But back then, it's just like, oh, it actually still looked great back then. Like say like Resolution or even projects before that, that looks just fine, and it flows better. The set flows better. So actually, I'm trying to turn the new stuff in my brain off all the time.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
But also, like all the time, I'm watching movies that we see. Actually, this is a both of us thing. We watch movies and we see things that are interesting, and I have a list on my phone of like, and it's literally the title of the list is Ideas to Steal. And it's just cool stuff where it's like, that lens looks great. Also, what's really nice, this is going to sound really lame. What's really nice about like one of the social media companies verifying you is that you can then, if you find somebody that did something really cool, like a cinematographer that did interesting, you can just message them and ask like, hey, what lens was that? And they'll just answer you. It's really cool. So it's a really cool way to get some information. And so stuff like that, or you see interesting lighting ideas, and you just jot it down over the years, and then right before you start developing your plan, you just check the ideas to steal.
All right. Well, you both had roles acting-wise in previous films, but not in Synchronic. Why was that?
We forgot. Yeah, we literally forgot. We were so busy. We forgot to like, hey, which role should we play?
All right, that's fair enough. Well, I want to get into the spoilers. So the last question that's non-spoiler really is, what was the budget and schedule for Synchronic?
I blocked it out.
Yeah,
I blocked it out.
I actually,
it was hard.
Yeah,
it's funny. People.
The schedule was 50 days, but we shot it in 22.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Really? Why?
And I don't know if we're at the phase where we should say the budget yet, but I will say this very honestly. There's this funny thing, like from the time the movie was announced to even now, is when they finally hit it big. They got
movie stars.
They got movie stars. They're big
pile of money.
Man, it is not a big budget movie at all. And in fact, in like the scale to budget ratio was steeper than anything we've ever done. Yeah. Where I was like, it was a very low budget film for what you see on screen.
Yeah. We were the lowest budget film shooting in New Orleans at the time. And there were probably 15, 20 other productions going on.
But were you joking? Did you really have 50 days? You cut it in half?
No. I just mean
that sounds like what?
Sorry about that. What we should have had 50. We should have had 50. We had it in 22 and it almost killed us. But actually, what was weird though is everyone had a great time. Like everyone was enjoying themselves on set. Justin and I hid the fact that we were like, we need more time so bad. We need more time so bad.
It was rough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, podcast listeners in iTunes and Spotify and Zoomcast watchers on the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, this is the time to press pause. If you have not seen Synchronic, because we're going to get into the spoilers, you will be able to rent it anywhere you could find online, and it might even still be playing in some drive-ins, so check your local drive-in listing. And we are going to get into spoilers, so I highly recommend, if you don't want the movie spoiled for you, to press pause, go rent Synchronic, because it's fantastic, and then come on back. So, all right, getting into the spoilers here, the movie for a while seems like it's these EMTs that are just dealing with the after effects of a dangerous new designer drug. And as we learn, the designer drug has time travel capabilities. And I'm curious, Justin, in your script, how you decided your structure of when you were going to reveal that. Because there is a nonlinear structure. You use the dream of Steve's coffins, the coffins that he sees that have bubbled up to the surface of family members. You use that as kind of like a recurring motif that he comes back to over and over. But it seems to me like your first act is really just setup of this designer drug. And then you're kind of into your second act by the time he does it for the first time. What do you consider the act breaks to be?
Oh man.
Where the hell are the act breaks anymore?
For one thing, that like the first thing you were saying is that this is the first movie we've made where we found a big part of the structure of the storytelling in the edit. And it came to us really late that we're just like, wait a second. The thesis to the movie is the Einstein quote, there is no distinction between past, present, or future. Why the hell are we telling this completely linear? And in the edit, we started to realize, like, wait, no, this works way better if at least, I don't think anyone watches this movie and defines it in the same way in their mind, like they do like Memento or something. Of course not. But to have like no nonlinear flourishes was like crazy. Was idiotic on our part.
Well, you know what it was is, and this actually kind of speaks to what he was saying, where it was this long development process. Is before you start seeing the visuals, what's happening feels really complicated. Really complicated. When you're just reading it, it feels like you're looking at math. Then you actually see the visuals, and it's like, oh, you take the pill and you time travel. It's really obvious. And so we had PTSD from this idea of like, this movie's really complicated. So we have to tell the story linearly in order to make sure that people aren't just like, this is like just nonsense. And then we realized later in the edit that it's like, nobody needs that now that we have the visual. So that was a lot of it.
It's also, interestingly enough, I mean, this is probably a helpful writer's thing, and there's no solution to it. But something we noticed that over, in the development of the script between 2015 and 2019, roughly, right? 18, 19, end of 18, we're shooting. In the development of that, almost, going through rounds and rounds of notes with many different people, many different producers, the notes were always had to do with rules. And always. And then you make the movie, and no one gives a shit about the rules. Right? And I don't know what the lesson there is for writers. We just know it's possible that you could just be getting the wrong notes from everybody for 3 years. Yeah. And it's no one's fault. It's just no one's fault. Yeah. It's just that there's such a difference between script and execution.
Yeah. If someone's confused on the rules, they should say that. They should say, like, hey, this confuses me and we should work it out. But it's so weird. Like, it's just so simple. You take the pill. You stay there. There's a place where you do it. 7 minutes, you're out. Like.
I was going to ask that actually, because rules are important, and I thought actually, to your credit, they were very clear here. You take the pill. You're back for 7 minutes, so he's able to wear a watch and keep track, and it has a little alarm on it.
Yeah.
And then the I don't want to say confusing, because it's confusing in a mysterious good way. And the only rule that needed a little getting used to is what the protagonist Steve had to get used to, which is that depending on where you stand is where you're going to go back in time. And so in different places of his apartment, he goes back to meet a Spanish conquistadora at one point. He meets a racist town where his apartment must have stood, and he also ends up in the Ice Age. 3 different places in one apartment. So it shows that like there's this randomization of where you actually are located is where you're going back in time. So I thought that was really fascinating. Was there a rule that was confusing people that you took out of the script of the movie? Because that's actually good math to know if there was something that you had to lose.
Yeah. That's the thing is because we do feel like the rules are clear, but there was like twice as much of explaining and clarifying and re-clarifying and demonstrating and all of that. There was the dosage thing.
Yeah, there was
like a half pill at a certain point.
Yeah, and there was also there was something that was like almost in the script. It may have existed in the script at some point. I don't remember now because it was obviously it was a very long process development. But like there was a point where there was a producer on it, a very awesome, amazing person who eventually dropped off, but they were like, I think I need to know like what is the rule for Z space? Right. So we're kind of dealing with XY coordinates in the movie. And he's like, well, we need to know like what if he was standing upstairs? So I was like, okay, well then he'll build a diagram of the place, and it was like, seriously, there was about to be a diagram showing how Z space affected.
Yeah, and we were like, this scene is cuttable.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you get into that though, because when he takes it on the roof, he does end up in a tree. He ends up in the air. So it's like, is that something that came as a consequence of that rule question, or was
no? That actually, to be honest, that scene was originally up until days before we shot. That scene was that Steve took it, and then all of a sudden he was underwater and had to swim up and come up in the lake, and the scene continued as is. But he swam to the marooners off in the distance.
And so you cut it because just shooting the swimming stuff would have required an underwater shoot and stuff like that.
Can we tell you the whole story here? So, we basically started to get into it, and people there was like big meetings, many meetings, being like, it is December. And yes, we're in the South, but it is freezing cold. We need not just wetsuits, we need full dry suits. And everybody that's in the water needs a safety diver and a boat. So there needs to be 4 people in the water. So 8 safety divers, boats. And we're like, and it's in the small pond. And they're going to have to build a grate. They're going to literally have to build up the bottom of the pond so that you can stand anywhere in it for safety, no matter what. And we're just like watching these meetings happening with our eyes growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And we look at our first AD and our producer, Dave, and we're like, I mean, is this like, what is it? How much does this cost? Like, what are we losing for this? And they're like, we got it. And like, pretty much. And then a few days passed and we were shooting the scene at abandoned Six Flags. And someone says, we tested the water quality and it tested for high fecal matter. And both of us, Justin and I, looked at each other and they're like, and somebody started saying like, we're going to find another pond. And Justin and I at the same time go, no, this doesn't take place in the pond anymore. It's just a tree. It falls out of a tree. It falls out of a tree. Nobody cares about the visual of someone swimming. Who cares about swimming? Like, cut swimming. He's running now. So,
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, and that's smart because yes, like it wasn't like a hinge story element. Actually, on that note, was there something that you really wanted to do, like an early idea that you had in your script, if you had, a massive amount of time and money that you couldn't execute? I'd love to hear what it was, or any other left turns that you originally had that you had to cut out.
I mean, well, one big thing was that you're shooting in New Orleans, but you're so low budget that it's so hard to get access to like real nitty gritty New Orleans. And there was so much from like living there that we wanted to get the textures of that city in it more. But literally it was just like, that was our first full union shoot. And there are a lot of rules and we had no money and we couldn't get enough of the real texture of that city and the people in it. You didn't do it. I mean, I think there's some. We just wanted a lot more. Yeah.
And that's actually, cool.
Yeah. That was something where it was honestly really rough in that regard. Where it's like we still feel like the movie captures New Orleans very nicely, but we also want to go even further because we adore that city. I mean, I just drove there for last New Year's just to chill out there because I'm completely in love with that city. And so in a way, even though it's like a very New Orleans movie, we still feel like we did it a disservice because we want it to be even more New Orleans.
All right, I never do this. I gotta disagree with you. You did a good job. I mean, I could see a version. I could see a version where there was a lot more, but honestly, don't beat yourself up on that because I knew where you were filming. It was very clear, and I got the flavor.
Yeah,
you're driving home from work though, and you look over at the median. In the median of the road,
there's just pickup trucks,
and there's trucks and people partying in the median, and there's just like old trees ripped up the sidewalk. You just want to, and everyone's partying, having some drinks. And you just want to go over there with a handheld camera and just get it on, rapid focus on everyone, and just get it. Get that.
Like one night, the day after we wrapped, I was woken up way too early, and obviously we were hungover as hell, because of course we went out after wrapping, to the sound of like a crowd and music. And I opened my front door and there's a parade just marching down our crappy street.
Yeah.
And we just went out into the parade and I was like, why don't we have a camera? I want to shoot this
great.
And find a way to shoot it in slow motion and make it seem like it's full of dread and just shoot people with a giant tuba in the middle of the street. And so anyways, and actually, by the way, the other thing that we didn't have the budget for was a dinosaur that was in the first draft of the script.
Okay.
So there was that.
So where would the dinosaur have been? Like just like a different time travel scene?
It would have been that same scene where the people that were worshiping and think that he's like some kind of a deity. They replaced the dinosaur. Honestly, really glad we did it. Not even if the best version of that dinosaur scene wasn't as unnerving or exciting as the idea of a cultural misunderstanding leading to your being trapped in time forever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. And so, Justin, were there any other like kind of left turns, sci-fi loops, or anything else that you had in an early iteration that you had to cut out? Because those are always fun to hear about.
Nothing we had to cut out really, but I would say there were some things that we talked about very briefly that were usually just like really dark jokes. Like it was like, what if someone went back in time, like before existence, or like what if someone went back in time and they just end up in space and immediately froze and died and floated off? Just yeah.
That's,
I mean, it was just stuff like that. It was just like,
no, that's cool. That's cool.
Weird dark jokes that people didn't.
It was mostly like you have to think about XYZ space in a particular way, which is also indefinite. So even this isn't scientifically accurate. But the idea that it's like, well, the Earth is in a different position, but also then again, XYZ space is in a different position. So who are we actually fooling here? So.
No, I mean, you guys did great stuff. I've been working on a time travel script, and actually it's an adaptation of a book. And one of the things that they had was a rock, in which they were doing a lot of experiments on a rock because it's a fixed object in time that goes, the span of many years. So them using a rock in the end as a place to time travel to and from, I thought was actually great, especially when he disappears and you just, without having any special effects, you just hear the bottle break on the rock. And that was like all you needed to know that he was gone. That was just very smooth, very smooth.
I guess we see each other in court.
Yeah. And so he goes back to,
that sounds really cool.
He goes back to 5 different periods. You had Spanish, the Conquistador, the Ice Age, the Colt in the Woods, the Hillbilly Haven. And were there any others other than like what you just said?
Well, I guess the war.
The war. Sorry, we were going to get to the Revolutionary War. Yes.
Right. No.
Okay.
Actually, though, there's other time periods other people go to.
Right.
So somebody goes back to the pirates. Somebody goes back to the fires of New Orleans. Somebody goes back to a time when it was desert, or maybe forward. You don't know. Maybe there's forward time travel in Synchronic. Somebody goes back to when it was unsettled and there's still first people. There's a lot of time travel, and I'm sure I missed one. I'm sure. Anyways, yeah.
Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to let you know we published issue 42, finally, of Backstory Magazine, our new issue. I'm very proud of it. There is so much great stuff in it, including an article that relates to time travel, which is today's subject, because we have the movie 12 Monkeys for its 25th anniversary. I interviewed the screenwriters, David Webb Peoples and his wife, Janet Peoples. And, look, if you've never read Backstory, you can test drive us on a desktop or laptop by reading our free issue. You could also get our Backstory app for an iPad and read the free issue there. And I'm really proud of the stuff we've done. One of my favorite things to do is interview writers of note, right? About a screenplay of theirs that's a passion project that's never been published before. And in this issue, we have 2 of those that are really great. We have Simon Kinberg's first screenplay for Ghouls of New York, plus a full in-depth interview with him about, what it was like selling his first screenplay and could he still make it and what he learned writing it. And we also have Joe Carnahan, the director, who co-wrote with his brother, Matthew Michael Carnahan, the script LA 58, which they're getting close to making. They've been trying to make it for, I think, almost a decade now, and I think they're getting much closer to finally making it. And I think he just did a revision. And LA 58 is great, and the entire screenplay is in there for you to read. It's the only place in the world you could read it. And of course, we have an interview with Joe about writing it and what he wants to do with it. So, look, there's a lot of other great content at Backstory Magazine. We have the creators of Ted Lasso talking about creating that amazing first season, and there's so much else to explore. You can look at our table of contents over at backstory.net and kind of peek inside what we have. And even after we publish, we're still always adding things. So we always add to issues after we publish as well. So there's lots of great stuff to explore. We release free excerpts of articles on our website. And again, you can test drive us. You can read the entire issue of our free issue that we put up there. I believe it's issue 37, and get a sense of who we are. And if you like us, you could use coupon code SAVE5. That'll save you $5 off a subscription to Backstory Magazine. And look, it would really mean a lot to me to have support from my podcast listeners. I can't do it without y'all. And there's a lot of great stuff for you to read. So I think it's a win-win if you go over to backstory.net. And it's also a win if you support the independent film Synchronic, which we're talking about today. And it's a great film. I absolutely love it. The craft is just really on point. The storytelling is fantastic. And it's a really cool time travel narrative. So without any further ado, let's get back to our interview with Justin and Aaron to talk about their latest film, Synchronic. Obviously you're doing a lot here. When you were on set, how much time did you have to rehearse?
Not as much as we normally have. Because
did you rehearse before you shot?
A little bit. You mean right, like on set? Yeah.
I mean on set or actually during your pre-production period, like before you started shooting?
Because of Anthony and Jamie's shooting and PR schedules, we did get to like a couple of days in Los Angeles. But honestly, it's funny. Those ended up becoming more like we were going to those were called rehearsals. What they really ended up being is developing some rapport and becoming friends and talking through the characters and just like the overview of everything that like we've been sitting with for 4 years. And, yes, we did run a few scenes, and then we just stopped and we're like, you know what, let's just grab some dinner and drinks and cigars and just chat. And because that's going to be a lot stronger than us running lines right now. That's personal work,
That makes sense.
Yeah. So a lot of that kind of stuff we were able to, and we ended up just doing on set.
Tell us how you found the ending, because I love the ending in which, essentially the crisis of the story, aside from Steve's cancer, which makes him a perfect candidate to go on a dangerous trip to find Brianna, his friend's daughter, who's missing. They thought for drugs, but apparently, as we learned, she's trapped in time. Tell me about arriving at this ending where he goes back into, what seems like the Revolutionary War, and she's been trapped there. First off, on a rule, she's been missing for over 24 hours. In her time zone, in her personal narrative, has she been trapped back in time 24 to 48 actual hours, or has it been a longer period for her? Because it would think that it's only been a short period like that because she's still around the area where she came back to.
Yeah, I'll give you a few things on that. One is we kind of going back to the idea of like, no one cares about rules. There was another thing that we're like, let's just not be clear about exactly how long she's been missing. We do have some dialogue that we just cut of how long she was missing, but then people start doing math in their head, and we're just like, you know what, who cares? But it was more like a week that she's gone, and the concept of Synchronic has it so that time moves the same way as it does in the present, parallel, just like a record. So whereas if it's moving here, if it's a week has passed in one place, and then you take the pill, you go back to a week later in the past. So that is the worst way of explaining it for a podcast. I'm doing stuff with my hands that kind of helps.
Yes.
But basically, she was actually there for a week. It doesn't go to the exact same time every single time. Okay. And that's why when he went to the Ice Age twice, some time had passed. The person in the distance had caught up, and.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that if she was there for a week, that she was still hanging around the rock. I mean, I guess she knew that the rock might have had something to do with how she was going to get back.
Well, she ends up in that ditch where they're burying the bodies. And so if she were there would be sources of water from canteens and possibly rations on the bodies of the dead. And that was the idea, that she would sustain herself over that time period off of basically the resources of the dead in that ditch.
Yeah.
Well, so obviously Steve gets trapped in the past, and that's the interesting thing, is that the writing on the rock was something that he wrote, even though, we had read it earlier in the movie.
So this is the fun part. So personally, we think that it's 50-50. We think that there is a good chance that Steve actually made it back to the present. And that's what that's okay though. And it's from the, it comes from the idea that when he grabbed the chair in the scene where he was escaping the bayou, touching something in the present can kind of like bring him back. It helps bring him back, and it's just an idea that we plant very subtly, and it's just a rule that is unexplored at the time, and there's no time to keep exploring it. We have to just go get Brianna. And so there's this idea that maybe human connection can bring him back. And so when they shake hands, there's a look on Jamie's face where he looks down and looks back up, and you wonder. And we understand that it is not. We very much understand it. This is not super clear. We meant this. It is meant to be a 50-50, 60-40, 75-25. Like he made it, he didn't, but there's a suggestion that there's a rule that maybe he just got pulled back into the present, and who carved Always on the Rock is actually a mystery. Somebody just did it at some point between now and then.
Sure.
And, yeah. And so that's in there. And actually, there is a version of the movie. There's an edit of the movie where he makes it. He just makes it back. But we didn't find it satisfying because it wasn't. It was very neat and very Hollywood.
Yeah, I guess I like this version. I love hearing that, by the way. So thanks for telling us. But like this version where it's not clear, there's a sense of sacrifice, and the whole movie as he's dying, he's kind of pining for the family that Steve has that he doesn't have. And at one point I was like, okay, he's going to go back in time and he's just going to stay because he finds his true love. So he's going to forget about the 7 minutes. Like maybe that's one possibility. And by the way, very glad you didn't do that. But the sacrifice at the end, as I saw it when I saw the movie without realizing that, I thought it was like a good poetic note as well. So I mean, how early did you have the idea of when it was going to end when you were writing your script, Justin? Like did you know all along, and were you reverse engineering?
Didn't reverse engineer the ending, but the ending didn't really change until when we chose to cut to black in the movie. Like it was kind of like, well, you can keep going with it and show it. But also another thing we realized, another good way to put it is that, the movie starts with, two people who are going to meet a horrible fate. They're hands holding, right? It's just this opening image of hands holding. And there was something about that, obviously there's a lot of themes running through this movie, but one of the themes is the importance of people in your life and the importance of human connection, as trite as that is. And in the end, ending on this image of their hands, it's like, a good way to put it is, it's less important to say definitively whether Steve made it back or not. It's more important to say visually he had a real human connection to his best friend. And that was cool. That's what it's like. That's what that was what's important about the ending. Is not answering the question of whether Steve made it back. That is a kind of getting it's kind of getting caught up in the weeds of something that's a less important theme in the movie. And it also in the realm of genre, sci-fi, horror, everything, it's always better to give people something to talk about and continue thinking about.
Yeah.
No matter how you answer certain mysteries, it will never be as satisfying as just letting people turn it over in their brain. Obviously, there's a line. There's a line where you just become too experimental and too vague, but hopefully you hit that spot where it's like, hey, you know what's emotionally satisfying? These two men love each other. And everything else is a discussion point.
That's what we do all the time in our films, is making sure that the emotional side of it has to have some form of a resolution. The sci-fi side of it has to have enough resolved, but also it can't be neat, because otherwise you haven't really opened up an idea. You've kind of just opened and closed it. And so we want to make sure that it's that always our sci-fi idea has more to go on.
And you accomplished that for sure. Editing's the last stage of storytelling, as we're getting into it, like our last 9 minutes here. You guys have co-editing credits. Do you edit at the same time? Do you split it up on different machines and see what you're doing? And just how does it work? And what was something really important that you learned during the editing for Synchronic? You spoke a little earlier about adding some nonlinear moments, but was there a big scene you had to cut, or something that needed a reshoot or something like that?
Learned so much. We actually learned one of our biggest lessons about editing on Synchronic, and I'll get to that real quick on our process. It's just that typically while we're shooting, we have a third editor we work with called Michael Felker, and he's more of the primary editor. We're kind of just like his understudies. But like he's editing the movie as we go, and then when we're done, he takes a little longer, and then he gives us like his first edit of the movie, and then we all watch it together and we make our notes and we discuss it, and then Aaron and I each take half of the movie and we go spend some time with our own halves, and then we get to where we go as far as I can go, and then we trade halves. We've done that over, and we do that back and forth until we get to edit lock, and then we get in then we get in the same room. And Aaron and I start working in the same room together, and then we get Michael Felker back in the room before we lock. And he knows it better than us, and he knows if we mess something up. But
what do you edit on? What software?
Premiere.
Okay.
Yeah, Premiere. But the biggest lesson we learned editing the movie, and actually it may have been the biggest lesson of the entire movie, was that from the time you make your first short film, your first music video, your first anything, everyone's telling you have to be able to kill your baby, right? You have to be able to just cut everything out, no matter how hard you worked on it that day, everything, no matter how expensive it was, no matter how emotionally attached you are to it. If you show it to people and they're like, it's kind of slow here, you just got to cut everything you can. Get it down. Get it as lean as you can. Well, we did that with Synchronic. And we took out everything that didn't need to be there. And you know what? It wasn't very good.
It was a lean, fast movie that meant nothing to anyone. You're just like, cool movie, guys. Cool movie. And what we learned was, it's like, yes, you have to have self-discipline, and you do in some respects, as they say. I'm sorry, I'm using the term "kill your baby." I know that's what people call it. It's like, oh, this thing that you love, you have to be able to cut everything out. But also, there is another lesson no one ever tells you, and that it is that just because someone watches your movie and gives you feedback and says, "Hey, it's kind of slow in this part," that does not mean just cut it. that means it feels a little slow in that part, but the result emotionally will not be the same in the end, potentially, if you just start hacking all that stuff out. You kind of end up with something that's kind of soulless. And every movie's different, but
you know what? This is a good place to This is a good place to pinpoint it. Tell us something that was a scene that you had to cut, and that your movie was the lesser for it, and you realized you needed to put it back in and maybe trim something else. What were one of those babies that you had to cut that actually destroyed rather than helped?
Okay, so you're going to think this is insane, but that you know how there's him having these flashes to these coffins, and then later on in the movie, Jamie explains the story behind the coffins and what's happening. Not in there at all. Just gone. There was no coffins. There was no explaining of the coffins. It was this idea that it's like, you know what's really interesting is watching him time travel and stuff, and it's just less interesting, two people talking over a table. And we were just like, really? You guys don't like? No.
That's crazy.
Watch him time travel. That's the cool stuff. And we're like, really? Okay. And we cut it, and people are like, all right, that's way faster. And then it was like, and people had no idea what to make of Jamie Dornan's character or his relationship to Steve. And it was that and a few other things, but that was the idea.
Well, this is really important. Do you guys have Final Cut? Because, I mean,
yes.
This seems like a place where a studio would have won out, but I'm glad they didn't.
We didn't. This is our first movie where we didn't technically contractually have Final Cut, but when we went back in and we did the re-edit that brought in some of the more character work and made the movie a little more meditative, I guess is a good way to put it. When we did that and we showed all the parties who had cut over us, they pretty much immediately were like, "This is a lot better. Onward." Yeah, they were thrilled. And it wasn't a problem.
That's great. That's rare that a studio would listen, but that's great that you were able to do a competing cut and then have the studio just be able to watch the two and say, okay, you're right. This one.
Yeah, we're going to kill the leaf blower in case I don't know if you can hear it.
We can't hear it.
Oh, great. Zoom's amazing. Okay. We can't hear you. There we go. But actually, just something that's funny to say is there's no studio, because even the word studio,
right.
That's a big budget. There is a production company. Like, it is a small movie. So
yeah.
When people think studio, they think studio movie. And
I know, but I mean this. And if you guys had a bigger budget, you might not have been able to win that battle because there would have been more cooks in the kitchen. So I agree with that.
I misinterpreted you. Yeah, absolutely.
No, but you're right. And it's good to point that out. It was a production company. You had a clearly healthy collaboration. So that's great. A few small questions. I know we're out of time. The dog. Do you want to tell us what happened to the dog? Did it just become the kind dog to racists? Is that what happened?
The dog lives a happy, healthy life, running around, just chasing squirrels in the wilderness.
Yes.
There's less fumes in the air. There's a lot more open space.
All right.
He's happy. He lived a long. My God, how long did Hawking live? 26?
No, he was actually He actually entered the Guinness Book. If you check the Guinness Book of World Records, from
That's good. Well, so
he made 50.
I'm curious if there could be, and I know you are going to say no to me, but I'm curious if there could be a sequel, because empirically we have no proof that the designer really did kill himself. And somebody that would discover a time traveling drug, I'm not sure their first move is to kill themselves. I understood that he was upset that so many people had died using his drug and troubled, but like I could easily see that there's a sequel with more time travel stuff going on, even a version in which Steve is stuck in the past, living his good life back in revolutionary America, figuring out what to do and or how to get back. Did you ever have any ideas for a sequel, or is this absolutely it for Synchronic?
I mean, we never had any ideas for it. We actually, it's funny. It's also the first movie. We don't really have the sequel rights. So anyone out there wants to do it, you should totally
hit up the production company.
Yes,
there could be a TV show about the designer drug.
Yeah,
that was the thing I think that we just keep talking about, was like, who are the chemists who made Synchronic? We want to see that story. Who are those people? What's their lab look like? How do they?
It's like in their garage.
It's in their garage. Yeah. When they hire the graphic designer to make the shitty packaging, like, how do they do it? Is it their buddy?
Well, and what happened is they started testing it. I mean, like, I don't know.
On themselves. Yeah. What if they're ethical and they always take their own product? You know?
Yeah.
Actually, we just want to make stupid Breaking Bad. You know? We want to make stupid sci-fi Breaking Bad.
Yes. Sci-fi Breaking Bad, I think, is your next title. So look, I know we're out of time. Last question. It's a big one. You could each answer, different ways. What was your toughest scene? So for Justin, for sure, because you also have the screenwriting credit, what was your toughest scene on the page? And then your toughest scene to direct? And then, of course, Aaron, your toughest scene to direct. And also, most importantly, how did you creatively rise through the challenge? So something that was difficult that happened, but you're going to show us the quick math of like kind of like what you said earlier, like the dive wasn't going to work, the water stuff wasn't going to work, and you're like, okay, he falls out of a tree. So
I've got one, which is just kind of came down to a communication lesson in a way, where the scene where he is in his apartment and takes the pill for the first time. We had about 1 million meetings about that, and he was going to be standing in a kiddie pool. And then what happened is because a lot of the time on larger shoots, people want to, he was going to be standing in a kiddie pool, and then as the transformation happens, that's all visual effects, But when you pan down, you see water, you see wet legs, all of that. And then on the day, what arrives is something that looks like half of a jacuzzi. And we're just like, wait, how's he going to step into that? He has to climb in. What's going on, And what we found out is because there's just so many moving pieces on a slightly larger shoot, even like this, a meeting happened without us. And that meeting was like, hey, there's a safety issue with kiddie pools. How do we solve this, And a
safety issue with kiddie pools, which are made for kids. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
Go on.
It's just like, how do we solve this? And they thought, and instead of trying to work out the safety issue with the kiddie pool, there was like, hey, there's an easier way to do this. We can just build something that is like solid, and then so it just arrived on set and it started filling it with water. And we're like, wait, hang on, what's going on here? And we figured it out. And we had to on this pretty tough scheduled day, we had to be like, hey guys, hang on 1 second. This can't work. How do we make the kiddie pool work? And we talked out our safety issues. We figured it out. And put all, and we were able to just put the kiddie pool back in, but we lost a few hours to it, and also the construction of this half jacuzzi thing. And it was just these things happen, but it was just it was in that moment we were like, wait, how do we go from the kiddie pool to the thing?
In my head, they built the shooting tank from Titanic out of wood.
Yeah, it was just what is? Yeah. What is? By the way, it was everyone with the best intentions. Everybody with both this is going to work well. This is going to be good for camera. It's going to be good for safety and all of that. And it was funny though, where it's something escalated so quickly, and then had to get pulled back to the original plan, but with small other adjustments. But it's just because we weren't there for that meeting, we didn't even know it happened. So yeah,
I'm getting texts from your publicist, so we're going to have to wrap up in a second. Okay. Justin, what was your toughest scene?
Oh,
and how'd you creatively rise to the challenge?
You know what? It's less about one scene. I think it was more about, you're making this very low budget film, but yet it's supposed to be on this big scale, and working with Anthony Mackie and Jamie Dornan. These two guys are the nicest guys in the world. Just like they were way nicer to us.
Oh my God.
Than they had.
They could have made our lives so hard.
Yeah.
They're like our best friends.
They were just the nicest people. And you're doing this movie with no money, and there's these, there's scenes where you're like, okay, go crawl through the pit with the dead bodies for 3 hours tonight as we yell from you over the pit wall, and we're at monitor. I think that was the hard stuff, where it was like you feel bad for what you're putting.
Okay.
Jamie Dornan and Anthony Mackie, these two extraordinarily kind people.
Yeah.
You had a cannonball that's like fizzing, not going off. What is the timeline of how long it takes a cannonball to explode?
Oh, it's a mortar, actually. It's an early mortar. We looked it up. These exist, but it's not a fizzing cannonball. It is something that's basically like it didn't go off because it didn't hit the little tunk.
Right. And so him stepping on it is what knocked it.
Right.
Okay. Cool. And your budget, under $5 million, over $5 million? Are you able to say that?
Can't say. We don't know.
Okay. All right.
We don't know. Maybe we're allowed to say. I don't know. We're just not gonna.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. I love your movie. You guys have been very generous with your time. I'm sorry we went over a minute, and I'm happy to have you back anytime to talk about The Endless. I didn't even ask you what you're shooting now. I know you wouldn't be able to tell me anyhow. Does it have a title?
It does have a title. That's all I can say.
Exactly. Well, look, I can't wait to see what it is. Get back to shooting, do your other interviews. You guys, thanks so much for your time, and really congrats on Synchronic. I absolutely love it.
Thank you, man. This is so fun. Let's do one on The Endless.
Yeah, take it easy, man. Bye. And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to writer and co-director Justin Benson and co-director Aaron Moorhead for being so generous with their time and talking about their latest film, Synchronic. And folks, you got to see Synchronic. Support independent cinema. Get out there, see Synchronic. It'll come right into your home during this crazy quarantine time that we're still in. And it will be a distraction that you will be glad that you took, because they really put the thought into their story. So make sure to go see Synchronic. And while you're surfing around online, it would mean a lot to me if you headed on over to backstory.net and took a look at our magazine. We just released issue 42 recently. You could read us on a desktop or laptop, or you could read us through our iPad app. And there's so much to explore. If you've never read us before, you could test drive us by reading the free issue. And if you like us, you could subscribe. Use discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5 over at backstory.net. And that'll save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. It'll give you access to anything new that we publish in the year and to our archive. Our archive currently goes back to issue 30, and I'm just getting ready to add issue 29 because I have to keep adding these things into the archive. Kind of annoying, but hey, just a blast. And look, there's so many great things to explore in Backstory, so at least go take a look at the table of contents over at backstory.net. And we're always actually adding things to the table of contents, new articles in between issues as well. We're going to have a lot of great Sundance coverage for you coming up. So thanks for considering supporting my passion project, Backstory Magazine. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2021. All rights reserved. And folks, if you want to reach out to me, you could always find me as Yo Goldsmith on Twitter or Yo Goldsmith on Instagram. I'm on Twitter the most. You could also find me as Backstory_mag on Twitter or Backstory_mag on Instagram. And I promise to be using Instagram more this year to tweet actually just cool bits of our artwork from inside our issues, because people don't always get a chance to peek inside, and we have such great art direction in the magazine. So I am promising to do more of that through Instagram as well. And, I have a Facebook fan page. I don't use it that often, but I check it occasionally. You could always drop an email to yogoldsmith@gmail.com. There's also ways you could write in through backstory.net. So, there's a gajillion ways to reach me. Pick whichever one works for you. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.